John 6 has a lot to say about words, and so this Devo today is called Hanging on Every One. It starts out with the story of the 5,000 people that were hungry and they needed to have food. Jesus asked one of his followers, where are we going to buy food to feed these people? Now, Jesus already knew the answer, but he wanted to ask and see what his followers said. They gave Jesus the little lunch that the boy had, and that was their answer. So we see Jesus' words being to question the faith of his followers. And next, Jesus gives them instructional words of thanks. So he instructs the people to sit down and for the disciples to pass out the food, and then he gave thanks for that little bitty lunch. And we then read that the people responded with words of affirmation of who Jesus was. So that's the first story. The second story told in this chapter is how his followers were in a boat in a dark storm and they were afraid. Jesus spoke words to them and said, "It is I, don't be afraid." And after these two stories, it says Jesus began to speak more words to the listeners who were quizzing him, and he tells them that the bread of heaven is the bread of God sent down to the world to bring life. And he says, anyone who comes to me will never go hungry or thirsty and never be driven away. He had just demonstrated these words by feeding the 5,000 and bringing the fearful to shore. He spoke lots of words to the disciples, and they began grumbling, and we hear Jesus speak again. These words I have spoken to you, they are full of spirit and life. And then it says that many turned away and quit following him, and Jesus spoke more words to his followers, to the 12, and he said, do you want to leave me too? If you've read this chapter before, you know that Peter answered right away and said, Lord, where would we go? You have the words of eternal life. We believe that you're the Holy One of God. Lots of words were spoken in John 6. Jesus spoke questioning words to determine the faith of his followers. Then he gave instructional words on seeing the impossible performed, feeding 5,000 people from a little boy's lunch. He spoke words of comfort and peace in the middle of a storm. And then he used the metaphor of bread, stating that he was the bread of life, and all his words were full of spirit and life. With all those words, Peter, the guy who later betrayed Jesus, spoke up and acknowledged that there was nowhere else to turn to. Only the words Jesus spoke were the words of eternal life. We all hang on words spoken by certain speakers that we admire or love. Some hang on the words of a president or a boss, or the words of a singer with incredible lyrics, or the words of a prophet or someone in high esteem. And every single person that lives will disappoint us in one way or another. As the words that people speak fail, they often disappoint, and sometimes they're just plain lies. This can cause one to become cynical and bitter against all the words spoken from the mouths of anyone. But in this story, we see that Jesus demonstrates and illustrates the words that we're to hang our very life on, those that are full of spirit and life, that offer sustenance and drink to the hungry and thirsty, those that offer peace when we're in the time of storm. Those are eternal words, not words of prophecy or even words of devotion, but the very words from Jesus, the bread of life. All other bread perishes, but Jesus is the sustenance. So why did many fall away and quit following Jesus after he spoke about this? They didn't like Jesus' words. Jesus' words didn't fit into their theology about God, about works, about the Father, or anything. Jesus taught dependence on his Father for everything, and these listeners had grown to be dependent on their works, their traditions, and their own authority. What Jesus was saying was completely foreign to them. It's interesting to me that throughout our lives, we too are in constant situations like being hungry or in need, or being afraid and in turmoil, and we too have a choice to make about this one phrase, the bread of life. Either we offer up our faith, our little lunch, and eat to satisfaction and invite Jesus into our boat and receive peace, or we walk away and seek satisfaction on our own, never surrendering to the fact that in him we live and breathe and exist. 3 words, bread of life. We have to decide to walk away or hang every minute of our day on those words. Jesus spoke about himself and his connection to the Father. It's worth thinking about today, the bread of life, and it's worth taking time to sit at his feet and eat and drink of his provision and presence, because he's with us always to the end of the world. And living a life of faith that hangs on those words that He's the bread of life is paramount to living a life at all.